Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. So in the last video, we talked about some key skills and concepts that you need to know to understand and learn data analytics and Power BI. In today's video, we're going to go over two of these concepts in more detail. We're going to go over ETL and data cleaning or data tidying. We are going to take some very messy and unorganized data that I created that you can also find in the details below, and we are going to clean up and organize this in a way that Power BI can understand it. We're going to perform every transformation, every change that we need within Power BI itself. We're going to import the data from Excel into Power BI, and we're going to perform every change that we need to this table within Power BI itself. Now, let's get started. On the screen, you'll see a dummy dataset that I created that has a list of candy sales for 2023. We'll be using this dataset to learn ETL and data tidying. We'll be extracting it, transforming it, and loading it into Power BI, and we're going to be performing changes to this dataset within Power BI itself. I've included this dataset in the description below if you want to follow along. So first look at this dataset. You can see there's plenty of discrepancies already. You can see empty rows. You can see the sales data has incomplete numbers. So you can see NA over here instead of any actual sales for March. You can see inconsistencies in formatting. For example, while we have our sales written out in whole numbers for throughout the entire months, in the cost per unit, we have it written out with a $sign. Now, we can make these changes to Excel itself, but sometimes when you're working with data, you might not have access to the original file. For example, let's say someone gives you a Power BI dashboard to work on. They might not give you the Excel file that it's connected to. It may be on someone else's computer or in a Teams channel that you don't have access to. It's good practice to know how to change the data in Power BI itself. The good part about that is that changing the data in Power BI won't change anything to the original file itself. Now let's go start working in Power BI. So there is a web version of Power BI and a desktop version of Power BI. I prefer working in the desktop version, which you can download in the Microsoft Store for free. When you first open Power BI, you'll create a blank report and it'll take you to this page. Power BI will ask you to import some data. Excel and SQL are typically the most common data sources that you'll use. And if you want to see all the data sources that you can pull from, you go to the top left over here and get data. Click the drag down button, and you'll see common data sources here, and if you want to see more, you just hit more and it'll show you this page. But now we'll import our candy sales data set. Hit get data, Excel workbook, and select candy sales data. This screen will open up asking you what data sets you want to import. So in candy sales data, we'll hit table 1, check it. Just take a quick look through. It does look like the data set we were going over in Excel just now. And you'll see a few buttons down here. If you hit load, this will load it into Power BI immediately. But for now, we'll hit transform data because we want to change some of the data in here first. So we'll hit transform data, and it'll take you right into Power Query. Power Query is available in both Excel and Power BI, and this is what allows you to change data. So here we can see the original table we were working with. Now you may not have this on your screen, but when I open Power Query, I have these statistics that tell me what is going on in each column in my table. To enable this, you'll go into View, you'll check column quality and column distribution. It's good practice to have this on because it will show you how much of your data is filled. It'll show you how much is empty, if there are any errors in your data, so you'll know what to look for and what to fix. To make changes, I'll run through there's a lot of features in Power Query which we won't go over in full detail in this video, but I'll be showing you how to make simple changes to this dataset, all from both the ribbon and from options in the table itself. So first thing we want to do is get rid of these null values, these empty rows that we were discussing in Excel. To do that, you can move right up here and you can hit remove rows and remove blank rows. So now anything that was just completely null is gone now. Next thing you will want to look at is these little numbers that you see up here. As you can see in columns, you have On the left side to the column name, you have this little box here that says ABC. Over here you'll see a 1, 2, 3, and over here you'll see it combined. This essentially is just telling you if the column is a string of characters or numbers or both. And then there's options for date and time as well. Now, the thing is, we want it consistent throughout all the columns. You can see for the first couple of columns, these are all characters, which is completely fine. For the cost per unit, it's in decimals, which is completely fine as well, because that is what we need since we are working with decimals here. Over here, we have whole numbers for this column, which is fine because everything is a whole number. Now, for the sales columns from January to December and including our total sales for 2023, we want these in whole numbers as well throughout all these columns. To change this to whole numbers, what we're first going to do is select January, hold down Shift, and go all the way to total 2023 sales. Then we're going to right-click any column, and we're going to change the type, and we're going to change these to whole numbers. So now it's changed all the NAs to error, which is perfect because this allows us to change these cells more easily. So now we want to get rid of these errors, and you could also see it reflects this up here in your column distribution statistics as well. This is fine because this allows us to change these more easily. We want to change these errors to 0 so everything is a consistent whole number. And the reason we're putting 0 is because we don't necessarily have the data anyway. So we can do a deep dive later on to see, why these have 0 sales. So to change these errors to a 0, we're going to deselect everything and we're going to right click any of our columns with an error. And we're going to go down to this option and replace our errors with a 0. Now, the reason I'm not highlighting everything and doing this is because this option won't show up if you highlight everything. You'll have replaced values, but this won't work for errors. So we have to go through one at a time and replace all the errors with a 0. Now we've replaced everything from January to December with zeros, but we don't want to change the errors in total sales in 2023 to zeros. What we want to do is replace this with the total sum from January to December. So there are 2 ways to do this. For both ways, you'll go into add columns, and typically I like to use columns from example, and you'll hit from all columns. I like to use this for simple columns because when you start typing in values over here, the Power Query will automatically pick up what you're trying to do. So for example, let's say if you put the total sales for the first 2 months, we'll first manually calculate everything from January to December because some of these sales numbers might not be correct if someone didn't use the sum function or put in the wrong sum function in Excel. So first, let's calculate sales from January to December, and that would be 2035. So the 1935 was wrong. Now, if we calculate next month, that'll be 1445. And you can see Power Query automatically picks this up and puts in all the sums. And you'll see how it transformed it to over here by this formula. For something like this isn't effective because you have to manually calculate everything, and which sometimes can be wrong, especially if you're using the calculator app. You might miss something and then Power Query might pick up on the wrong pattern. So instead, what we could do is custom column. We'll name this total sales. And what we'll do is from here, we'll go into each column and we're just going to insert them. January plus February plus March and so on. And you can see we get the same results. Now, because we changed all these columns to whole numbers earlier, Power Query was able to calculate this correctly. If it was both, if it contained the errors, if there were some strings in here, it wouldn't be able to do this. So now we could get rid of total 2023 sales and rename this to total 2023. And this will be our new column. And also make sure to just change this to whole number as well. Now, looking at everything else, our data set looks pretty clean now. And so what we're going to do is go to home. We're going to go to close and apply. Now, if you go into the left over here, click table view, you will see the table you worked on. And as reference, this is the original Excel file. This is the one I have it connected to, and you can see it made no changes to the original file at all. Now that we have our data clean, we could actually begin working with it, create some dashboards. You can see, we could check to see if anything works over here. We can put in a regular card. Just insert, let's say, total sales for 2023. And you can see we have 24,000 total sales for all of 2023 across all the rows. Now, if you do want to open Power Query backup, you just go to the top over here in home, transform data, and transform data. And you'll open up the table that you worked on. The last thing I wanted to show you is, some of you may have noticed that when we worked on changing the columns, there were steps that were added onto here each time we made a change. So let's say you mistakenly delete a column like this. So let's delete our 2023 sales. Now, how do you get it back? You just delete that last step you did, and you could continue working from there again. And any changes you've made will reflect on your dashboards in real time. So for example, let's change this 1150 to 2000. Hit close and apply. And we see that the total sales for 2023 went up by $1,000 immediately after Power BI refreshed it. Alright, so now we've actually practiced ETL and data cleaning within Power BI itself. Now that you understand these concepts, next week we'll be going over the next big topic, data modeling. If you found this video useful, please like and subscribe, and I will see you next week.